Hey everyone, Steve here with another Fantasy Critic update. It's actually been a year since the last time I did one of these videos. 2020 certainly wasn't the year anyone expected, both for video games and the world at large, but we're not going to talk about any of that here today. We're here to talk about what's new in Fantasy Critic for 2021. So some of these changes have been in for a few weeks, and some are only a few days old, but we're going to go through all of it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the improvements to the Master Games list, and you'll notice right off the bat this loads much faster than it used to. And the reason for that is because I added pages instead of having the whole thing load all at once every game for the whole year. That could take a few seconds depending on what kind of device you were on. So not only now are there pages, but there's also helpful filters. So you can search for a specific game. If I want to see how's Metroid Prime 4 doing this year, I can just search for Metroid. Anything with the name Metroid comes up. You can also search by release date. If I want to see anything from the summer, I can just check off release date and see, okay, here are the games that are planned for summer 2021. That's helpful. You can change how many games show up per page, and you can choose what you're sorting by in ascending or descending order. And we'll get to filtering by tags soon enough. So the next thing I want to talk about isn't something that I can show, but it's just something that I need to talk about, which is that bids and drops used to process on Sunday night and Monday night, respectively. But going forward for 2021, both bids and drops will process on Saturday nights at 8 p.m. New York City time. They'll process drops, then bids, and it will work out if you drop a game. If you have a full roster of games and you want to pick up a game, you put in your drop, you put in your bid. The drop happens first, you'll then get your bid because you'll have a spot open for it. So the system will let you bid for a game even if you have a full roster, assuming that you have a drop in between. The bid will succeed. If you don't drop anything, the bid will fail because you don't have any spots available. So the reason I did this twofold. One, to be honest, just to reduce my workload as far as how many nights I have to focus on the site. And two, I've noticed that there's not a whole lot of gaming news, reviews, releases that come out over the weekend, so it seemed like a good choice Saturday night. So the next thing I want to talk about is the way that scoring is going to work in 2021. So in the past, if a game got a 70 or above, you would gain 1 point for each point over 70 and 2 points for each point over 90. And below a 70, you would lose 1 point for each point below 70. The points above 70 is not changing in 2021, but points below 70 is changing. I'm effectively adding diminishing returns so that the further you get away from 70, the less each point down hurts you. So 60 to 70 still works the same. If you get a 60, that's minus 10 points. But if a game gets a 50, that's only minus 15 points because each point between 50 and 60 is worth less than the points between 60 and 70. And that follows all the way down, and it actually works out that you can never lose more than 20 points even if the game gets a 0. So the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want one game to ruin your entire year or one amazing counter pick to win your entire year. I've noticed in the past that sometimes there's that one game, like Left Alive or Fast and Furious Crossroads, where if you pick it, game gets a 30-something, you're done. That's it, it's over. And if you counterpick that game, you win, pretty much. It's hard to lose when you have 40 points from your counterpick. So I have an example here, which is Left Alive from a few years ago, where you would lose 17.75 points if you pick this game because it got a 38. You can see how that breaks down here, where each 10-point range is worth less than the previous one. And if you counterpick the game, you still get the straight inverse. So it doesn't help you as much as in the past as it would have if you counterpick it, but it doesn't hurt you as much if you regular pick it. And I think that will give less scenarios where people are out because of just one game. So the next thing I want to run through real quick is a few new tools for league managers to manage their leagues better. And the first one is being able to remove players from their league midway through the year. I've had a couple people ask me about this, and I do think it's something that should be avoided because it will affect your league. If you remove someone, then their games become available. But I understand that there are sometimes situations where you'd want to do this, but you can now go to remove a player if you're the league manager and go ahead and remove someone. And it warns you because I don't think you should do this lightly, but it can be done. Now, this is not the same thing as setting active players. If you have someone that just leaves a league in between years and you're not going to have them come back, I would use the Manage Active Players feature to just turn them off for a given year. And if they come back in 2022, that's fine. Next thing's very simple, but league managers can now choose to promote a different player to League Manager, which is right here. Promote new League Manager. Very simple. And the last new manager feature I want to talk about is Post New Message to League, where you can post a message like join the Discord group, and you can post that message and it'll show up right here. So if you don't have a great way of communicating with your league, or if you want to post some sort of bulletin, you can do that with this. And you can see the history of your messages by going to your league history page, and you can also delete messages here if you need to. Next up are some actual new gameplay options that I want to talk about. So let's go ahead and make a new league here. I'm going to say playing in 2021. This part hasn't changed. I'm going to have 4 players. So the first thing that is new here is this minimum bid amount. So you can now specify the minimum dollar value for any bid. So in the past, you could always bid $0 on a game, and if someone bid $1, you'd get outbid, but that option was always available to you. I found that the strategy became bid $0 on every game except for one. Spend $100 on one game, Demon Souls, for example, or maybe Tony Hawk, or Paper Mario Origami King. Spend all your money on one game, save everything else, just $0 bids. So now you can do a $1 minimum, which is what I would recommend if you're going to do a minimum. But you can do any dollars amount between 0 and 100. I think 1 is the most reasonable, other than 0. And also, there's a new feature called Counterpicks Block Drops. So what this does, if you turn this on for your league, even if your league allows dropping games, if someone's game gets counterpicked, they no longer can drop it no matter what. So what this does, if someone drafts Elden Ring and someone counterpicks it, in July, if it gets announced that it's not coming out until 2022, the person that picked it can't drop it, even if their league would normally allow it to be dropped. So the last new feature is probably the biggest change, which is the new tags system. So this replaces the old eligibility system where we would categorize games based on how big of a remake they are. Is it a new game? Is it a complete remake, a remaster, etc.? And is it free to play? Is it early access? Is it an unannounced game or released internationally? All of that has been replaced by every game has one or more tags, and your league can choose what tags are allowed in your league. So this, by default, you allow expansion packs, you allow free-to-play, new game, games that are planned for early access but not yet in early access. Reimagining is basically the same thing that complete remake used to be. Standard remakes, all of these have examples to them. You can drag and drop these around to choose what you want to be available in your league. And the system will warn you if you do something really strange, like say you're banning new games, for example. You can hit reset changes if you want to go back to the defaults. So the big advantages of this, one, are just a simplification of the code and flexibility to add new tags and make it easier to see what categories a certain game is in, certainly. But also, you can now search on this stuff. With the new filters, you can filter on tags and see all the unannounced games for 2021. You can see all the remakes for 2021 very easily. And I think that's a nice feature to be able to filter that way. So that's it for the tag system, and that's also it for all the features that are in right now. But I do want to talk a little bit about what's coming for the rest of the year, and maybe even a little bit beyond that. So the first thing is conditional drops, and what I mean by that is if you're bidding on a game at the same time that you're dropping a game, I want you to be able to say, only drop this game if I win this bid, so that you don't end up dropping the game, losing the bid, and now you don't have either of them. You should be able to specify that condition. That feature should be in the first few months of 2021. So next up is a better way for the site to handle shadow drops. So if it's Tuesday and a game gets announced as releasing tomorrow on Wednesday, bids don't process until Saturday, so essentially no one can take that game, and that's no fun. It's not even a part of Fantasy Critic at that point. So what I'm going to add is the ability for league managers to specify a game as special auction, where the bids for that game will process for that league only at a specific time. So when Hollow Knight Silksong in February gets announced that it's releasing tomorrow, your league manager can say, Hollow Knight bids are going to process in 4 hours from now. Put your bids in now, and then the site will run that at the time that the league manager set it to. And it'll post a message at the top of your group, at the top of your league, saying that this is going to happen at this certain time. And hopefully this will allow these games to actually be part of Fantasy Critic. So the last thing I want to talk about isn't going to be a part of the site for a while, but I think it is a really cool idea, and it's a big reason why I wanted to switch to this tag system, which is that you can do a lot with this tag system as the basis. So one thing you can do is I could add required tags, where not only can you ban a tag, but you can require that all games must have a tag. Now that doesn't sound that useful as far as like, oh, every game must be a new game, until you think we could have other tags. We could have Nintendo tag, we could have the PlayStation tag, we could have the Xbox tag, and any game that's on Xbox gets the Xbox tag, any game that's on PlayStation gets the PlayStation tag. And then you can say, this league, all games must have the PlayStation tag, and now you have a PlayStation specific league, which I know is something that some people have wanted in the past. Beyond platform, we could also see things like genre tags, where games will have the first-person shooter tag, the platformer tag, the action tag, the MMO tag, and you could require certain tags, ban certain tags, things like that. So the last feature is another thing that's not going to be around for a while, but it is something that the tag system allows that the old eligibility system didn't, which is advanced lineups, where if you think about fantasy football, you don't just have a bunch of players of any position, you have given positions. You have quarterback, running back, wide receivers, tight ends, etc. What we can do with the tag system is say all publishers have to have a remake. All publishers have to have one yearly installment. There's a slot that says this has to be a yearly installment. This one has to be a remake. This one has to be a first-person shooter. This one has to be a platformer. What ends up happening there is going to depend on what interest I see from the community and what features people want to see the most, what different tag types people want to see the most. So I think that this could bring a whole new dynamic to Fantasy Critic, where right now I just recommend that you don't allow ports or remasters or yearly installments at all. But if instead the question is everyone gets one slot for their yearly installment, and now you have to consider, do I take Madden or do I take FIFA or do I take F1 Racing? I think that that is totally an interesting question and brings some variety to your draft. So that feature won't be in for quite a while, probably much later in the year, maybe even as a 2022 feature. It also would be an optional thing. You could still do the standard leagues with just the free reign to pick whatever you want. But I do think that this is a promising idea that I hope to really flesh out over the next few months, implement over the few months after that. So that's it for this update video. Hope you have a good 2021 and happy drafting.